The first light of dawn stretched across the African savanna like a golden veil, touching every blade of grass and tip of acacia with gentle fire. The air was cool, filled with the smell of earth and dew, and the distant mountains shimmered faintly through the morning haze. A soft wind moved in long, lazy waves, bending the tall grasses as if the land itself were breathing. Birds began their chorus, a melody of chirps and calls that echoed across the plains. But beneath the song, a quiet tension hung in the air, subtle yet insistent. Something watched, something waited. Walking carefully through the high grass, her steps silent and deliberate, a black African woman moved like a shadow among the golden stalks. She was a wildlife guide, someone who had spent her life learning the rhythms of this land and the secrets hidden in its trees. Her eyes scanned the horizon constantly, sharp and observant, but her hands were gentle, brushing lightly over the stalks as if to apologize for disturbing them. She carried no weapons, only a small pack and a camera slung over her shoulder, tools of observation, not defense. Every animal she passed, birds, insects, a lone jackal in the distance, felt her calm presence, but the gorilla at the edge of the forest did not yet share her trust. The savanna seemed to hold its breath as the wind stirred again, carrying the scents of earth, grass, and the faint musk of the gorilla. The woman adjusted her weight slightly, careful not to startle him, and whispered to herself softly, a quiet mantra meant to steady her own nerves. Every step was measured, every glance intentional. She knew that any sudden movement could provoke curiosity or aggression in a creature as powerful as the silverback. Yet she also knew that she had nothing to fear if she remained calm, if she respected the unspoken boundaries of the wild. In the trees above, birds shifted nervously, wings rustling against leaves. Somewhere deep in the forest, the faint thump of a branch breaking suggested the approach of another presence, perhaps a small predator moving cautiously through undergrowth. The gorilla's chest rose and fell, massive and controlled, but his eyes never left her. There was a weight in his stare, a quiet intelligence, and for a moment she felt the faintest connection, a bridge of understanding between species, fragile and fleeting. Yet even in this moment of silent recognition, the tension remained. The air was alive with anticipation, a prelude to the events yet to unfold. Sunlight moved across the plains, illuminating the rolling grasslands in streaks of gold and amber. Shadows shifted with every passing cloud, creating patterns that danced across the woman's face and the gorilla's powerful frame. She crouched slightly, careful not to appear threatening, and scanned the horizon for the faintest signs of movement. Every rustle, every whisper of wind through the acacia branches carried weight. The gorilla's massive form became a study in contrasts, majestic and threatening, calm and restless. And though she had witnessed many wild encounters before, this one felt different. The forest seemed to pulse with expectation, every creature attuned to the rhythm of approaching drama. A single insect buzzed past her ear, a small, mundane sound that felt startlingly loud in the silence. She smiled faintly at the absurdity, aware that in this world life existed in extremes, moments of serene beauty immediately adjacent to moments of raw, dangerous intensity. The gorilla shifted once more, scratching at the earth with his fingers, and the baby antelope froze, eyes wide. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the faint silhouettes of trees whispered of hidden movement. Nature had set its stage, and every character, human and animal alike, was in place, waiting for the next act. The woman took a slow breath, letting the scent of the grass and the warm sun fill her senses. She had come to this place seeking understanding, seeking the quiet truths of the savanna, but the land reminded her that innocence was always temporary. The gorilla watched her, alert but unmoving, a silent sentinel on the edge of the forest. The antelope grazed, eyes flicking nervously toward the shadows. Birds fluttered and called, and the wind carried a hint of something unseen yet imminently present. The stage was set for the story that would unfold, a tale of strength and vulnerability, fear and courage, the unspoken language of survival. As the sun climbed higher, painting long shadows across the golden grass, the woman continued her careful journey. Every step felt like a dialogue with the savanna, a conversation conducted in silence and respect. And all the while, the gorilla remained a looming presence, a reminder that even in moments of calm, the wild waited patiently, full of promise and peril. Somewhere deep in the forest, leaves rustled, and a distant roar echoed faintly. The air seemed charged with anticipation. The world held its breath. The calm was ending, and the storm had not yet arrived. The sudden snap of a branch broke the morning calm, and before the woman could react, the silverback gorilla lunged from the edge of the forest. Dust erupted from the ground as its massive hands crashed into the tall grass, sending birds scattering in every direction. Her heart leapt into her throat, and for a moment she froze, paralyzed by shock. The gorilla's roar was deep and guttural, vibrating through the earth and echoing off the distant hills. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the weight of the animal's presence pinned her in place. The world seemed to slow, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs, and the sharp intake of her own breath magnified in the tense air.
Stillness. She stumbled backward, kicking up clouds of dust as she tried to dodge the gorilla's charge. The sheer power of the animal made each movement terrifyingly unpredictable. Her arms flailed as she tried to shield herself, but the gorilla's immense strength crushed every attempt at escape. Its eyes were fixed on her with a mix of confusion and suspicion, as if it could not decide whether she was a threat or something to be feared. Every second stretched endlessly, each one more frightening than the last. Somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of a lion stirred, and the woman caught sight of its head rising from the shade of an acacia tree, ears twitching, eyes narrowing with instinctive awareness. Around her, the savanna was alive with panic. A herd of gazelles bounded away in a blur of legs and dust. The baby antelope from earlier pressed its small body against the earth, ears flat, eyes wide, trying to disappear into the golden grass. Birds fluttered violently from branch to branch, squawking in alarm. Even the wind seemed to stiffen, carrying the sense of fear, sweat, and dust in heavy waves. The woman's pulse hammered in her ears as she struggled to breathe, and for a brief, horrifying moment, she felt the crushing weight of helplessness pressing down. Her hands clawed up the earth, and her mind raced desperately for a way out. The gorilla's hands slammed into the ground beside her, sending her reeling to one side. Its muscles flexed beneath thick fur, power concentrated in every movement, a living wall of strength and instinct. She felt the tips of its fingers brush against her arm, and panic erupted in her chest like fire. She tried to shout, to assert herself, but the roar of the gorilla swallowed her voice. The ground shook under its steps, leaves rained down from the acacia tree above, and the distance between life and harm narrowed terrifyingly. Every nerve in her body screamed. Survival became a single thought, simple and raw, overriding fear with clarity. Then a new presence entered the chaos. The distant lion moved. Its large frame weaved through the tall grass, muscles coiling and stretching with astonishing speed. Dust clouds billowed around its paws as it approached, growls low and resonant in its throat. The gorilla's gaze flicked to the predator, uncertainty flashing in its dark eyes. The lion's movement was precise and calculated, a combination of force and instinct that demanded attention. The woman's chest heaved as hope flickered faintly in her heart. Perhaps the storm had not yet claimed her. The lion lunged, not at the woman, but at the gorilla. It was a calculated risk, a diversion so raw and instinctive that it left the woman breathless with awe and terror. The gorilla paused, surprised, and the split second was enough. The woman scrambled, twisting her body away from the edge of the forest, dust stinging her eyes, her limbs trembling with the effort of survival. She could feel the ground shift beneath her, the weight of predator and protector dancing around her in an intricate, dangerous ballet. Every motion was measured, every sound was magnified. The heavy breaths of the gorilla, the growl of the lion, the rustling of grass underfoot. Fear and relief collided inside her, raw and uncontrollable. She stumbled again, catching herself on a bent acacia branch, and the lion circled the gorilla with astonishing precision. The gorilla's roar faded slightly, replaced by a low, uncertain grunt. Its movement slowed, distracted by the intruder that had come without warning, a guardian whose loyalty to no human, and yet instinctively to justice, was clear. The savannah held its breath, every creature frozen, every eye trained on the unfolding drama. The air seemed to thicken with tension, the weight of potential danger pressing down from every direction. For a moment, the world shrunk to the space between predator, prey, and protector. Dust clouds drifted lazily in the sunlight, illuminated by the pale morning glow. The gorilla shifted its stance, unsure, muscles taut and heavy. The lion, graceful and precise, edged closer, growling and lunging with restraint, enough to command attention, but not to strike outright. The woman, trembling and shaken, realized she could finally move, inching backward with careful steps, never taking her eyes off either animal. Her heart beat
so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She felt the mix of raw fear and emerging hope, a strange cocktail that left her dizzy and alert at the same time. Every movement of the lion and gorilla seemed magnified, a slow-motion display of power and instinct. The woman's hands were scraped and dusty, her clothes torn slightly by the tussle, yet she felt an odd sense of connection, as if she were witnessing something primal and sacred. The gorilla's eyes, filled with suspicion and awareness, flicked repeatedly between her and the lion. The lion, precise and deliberate, maintained its position, aware of its role as an unlikely savior. Dust and light swirled around them, creating a visual tension that felt almost painterly, as though the entire savannah had been paused for a single critical moment. Finally, the gorilla's grip weakened slightly, distracted and overwhelmed by the lion's presence. The woman's muscles, taut with adrenaline, allowed her to twist free just enough to take a cautious step backward. Her breath came in sharp, quick bursts, her body trembling from fear, relief, and exhaustion. She dared to look up at the lion, whose amber eyes locked on hers for a brief, fleeting instant, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. It was a glance heavy with understanding, a silent promise that she would not be harmed further. Nature, in all its danger and unpredictability, had offered mercy in the most unexpected form. The gorilla finally retreated a few steps, muscles coiling and uncoiling as it considered the lion, before eventually turning back toward the forest with a last uncertain grunt. The lion watched until the massive figure disappeared among the trees, then slowly padded back toward the woman, low growls fading into soft, careful breathing. She sank to the ground, chest heaving, dust clinging to her skin and hair. Her hands shook uncontrollably, but the awareness of life, preserved against impossible odds, grounded her. Around her, the savannah returned to its quiet rhythm, birds cautiously resuming their songs, the baby antelope rising to graze again, and the wind carrying the lingering scent of dust, sweat, and survival. For a long moment, the woman simply sat there, watching the lion settle a few meters away, its eyes half-lidded but vigilant. The enormity of the encounter settled in slowly, a mix of terror and gratitude weaving through her chest.
Nature had reminded her of its power, and yet, in the same breath, it had shown its unexpected mercy. The savanna stretched endlessly around her, golden and calm once more, but the memory of the gorilla's charge, the lion's sudden intervention, and her own heart-pounding flight would remain vivid forever. The world had held its breath, and now, for a fleeting moment, it exhaled. The gorilla's retreat was sudden, almost reluctant, as if it had been pulled backward by some invisible force. Its massive shoulders hunched as it turned toward the forest, the sound of its heavy steps fading into the rustling of leaves and snapping of distant branches. The woman remained frozen for a heartbeat, chest heaving, eyes wide, trying to process the sheer impossibility of what had just occurred. Every muscle in her body was trembling, exhausted from the adrenaline that had driven her through the attack. The dust hung thick in the air, drifting lazily with the wind, settling over the savanna like a faint golden haze, and only slowly did the forest's tension ease. The lion, still alert, padded closer, each movement controlled and graceful, its amber eyes never leaving her form. There was no rush, no sudden charge, only a slow, careful approach that radiated both power and understanding. It stopped a few feet away, lowering its massive head to study her with a calm intensity. She dared to look at it directly, meeting its gaze, and for a brief, almost miraculous instant, the terror of moments before melted into awe. The lion had become her silent guardian, a presence that both reassured and reminded her of the delicate balance that held the wild together. It was impossible to separate fear from gratitude, danger from mercy in that single breathless moment. She sank to the ground slowly, legs folding beneath her as though they could no longer bear the weight of her body. Her hands clutched at the dusty grass, and her breath came in short, uneven gasps. The warmth of the sun had risen higher now, glinting off the golden plains and highlighting the fine layer of dust that clung to her skin and hair. The soft hum of insects returned, faint and comforting, while the distant calls of birds resumed their morning chorus. Even the baby antelope from earlier ventured timidly back into the open, ears flicking nervously as it tested the quiet. The savanna had survived its moment of chaos, and the fragile rhythm of life slowly returned. Her mind raced, retracing the events in sharp, vivid flashes. The gorilla's sudden charge, the ground trembling under its weight, the roar that had pierced the air, and then the lion. She could still feel the power of that presence, the way its growls had shifted the energy in the clearing, redirecting the threat without a single strike against her. It was an intervention that defied expectation, a reminder that survival in the wild often depends on courage found in the unlikeliest of allies. She reached a hand toward the lion instinctively, tentative yet drawn by a profound sense of connection, and the great cat remained still, acknowledging her gesture with a calm, watchful gaze. Around them, the savanna exhaled, settling into quietude. Dust swirled around the sun-dappled grass, and distant herds of wildebeest and gazelles began to move slowly forward, cautious but alive. The wind carried the smell of earth and grass, a grounding aroma that reminded her of life continuing beyond the fear. Even the trees seemed to relax, leaves swaying gently in the warm breeze, shadows stretching long across the plains. For the first time since the attack, she allowed herself to breathe fully, the rhythm of her heartbeat aligning with the steady pulse of nature around her. The lion remained at her side, a silent sentinel, its tail flicking lazily, but muscles coiled and ready should danger return. She could see the faint scars on its muzzle and hear the subtle rasp of its breath, reminders that even the strongest among them carried past battles. Despite its power, it had chosen restraint, measured intervention, and the woman felt a deep respect and understanding rise within her. This was not the mindless force of a predator. It was an act of awareness, a calculated compassion that bridged the worlds of human and wild animal. In that quiet moment, she realized that the savannah held not only danger, but also grace, not only fear, but also protection. As the sun began to sink, casting long orange and purple shadows across the golden plains, the woman rose slowly, legs weak but steady. She stepped forward, brushing dust from her clothing, and approached the lion with cautious reverence. The great cat did not flinch, only followed her movement with calm, watchful eyes. A shared understanding passed silently between them, a recognition of survival, respect, and mutual trust. Every step she took felt monumental, a small act of courage after the terror of moments before. The vastness of the savannah stretched endlessly around them, the sky painted in streaks of fire and shadow, a reminder of the beauty and unpredictability of the natural world. She paused, taking in the sight of the forest edge where the gorilla had disappeared. The shadows seemed to shift and twist, alive with hidden movement, and she understood more clearly than ever the balance of the wild. Every creature had a role, every act a consequence, and every day was a negotiation between life and risk. The lion's presence beside her was proof that even in the harshest landscapes, mercy and courage could emerge in forms unexpected and miraculous. A soft breeze brushed across her face, carrying with it the earthy scent of grass and leaves, and she allowed herself a quiet smile, knowing she had been spared by forces beyond her control. The sun sank further, streaking the horizon with a deep, burning orange, and the savannah seemed to hold its breath once more. Dust settled over the plains, shimmering faintly in the last light, while the birds returned to their branches and distant herds grazed, ever watchful. The lion stretched lazily, then settled on the ground near her, its body a living reminder of both strength and vigilance. She sank to the grass beside it, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds and sights fade.
Sense of the plains fill her senses. Survival, she realized, was not only about strength or speed, it was about trust, respect, and the quiet courage to face the impossible. As darkness crept across the land, painting long shadows and cooling the air, she lifted her gaze to the vast horizon. The forest and plains stretched endlessly, filled with life, danger, and mystery. The encounter with the gorilla had been terrifying, and the lion's intervention miraculous, but the memory of it would shape her forever. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of a bird, and every shadow flickering across the golden grass would remind her of the fragile balance between fear and mercy, death and survival. And as the last light of the sun touched the plains, the woman felt a profound connection to the world around her, the wild, beautiful, terrifying world that had spared her this day. The savannah was calm once more. Dust glimmered in the fading light, the wind whispered through acacia branches, and the lion remained at her side, vigilant yet serene. Life continued, fragile and powerful all at once. She allowed herself one final deep breath, feeling the heartbeat of the plains beneath her feet, and understood a truth the wild always teaches. Courage, mercy, and survival often come from the most unexpected places. She rose slowly, brushing the dust from her clothes, and took her first careful steps toward safety, every glance filled with gratitude and wonder. The vast African landscape stretched endlessly around her, a canvas of danger, beauty, and the raw, unyielding spirit of life.